Caelan Thorne was a ghost at Crestwood Academy. At 17, he moved through the hallowed, polished halls of the elite institution like a whisper, his presence barely registering. His frame was slender, his dark hair perpetually falling into his eyes, and his simple, slightly worn clothes stood in stark contrast to the designer labels favored by his classmates. He was the new transfer, dropped mid-semester into a world of inherited wealth and entrenched social hierarchies. A world far removed from the bustling coastal city neighborhood his family had just left for his father's new tech venture. He kept his gaze fixed on the ornate mosaic floors, clutching the strap of his backpack as he navigated the throngs of students. Crestwood was an ancient, sprawling campus, its ivy-clad stone buildings connected by manicured courtyards and echoing cloisters. 3 weeks in, and each day felt like a tightrope walk, a delicate balance of blending in and disappearing entirely. The grand dining hall was a theater of social performance, the athletic fields a stage for the school's golden children, and the central quad a parade ground for the popular cliques who treated everyone else as mere background noise. What none of his new peers knew, what Caelan desperately hoped would remain his secret, was the rigorous training he'd undergone since childhood. His father, a former Special Forces operative, had enrolled him in a specialized combat discipline after Caelan endured a relentless campaign of bullying at his previous school, leaving him emotionally scarred and physically vulnerable. Power is not for display, Caelan, his father had drilled into him for years. It is for defense, a shield, never a sword, unless the shield is all that remains. For nearly a decade, Caelan had mastered a unique blend of close-quarters combat, grappling, and tactical awareness. He could neutralize threats twice his size with chilling efficiency, but the core lesson remained: avoid conflict at all costs, but if forced, act decisively. At Crestwood, Caelan adhered to this philosophy with unwavering discipline. He'd seen the swift, brutal consequences for students who dared to challenge the established order: suspensions, expulsions, social ostracization. His family had sacrificed much for this fresh start, and Caelan knew he couldn't risk any disruption. So, when the Academy's resident predators finally set their sights on him, Caelan made the conscious choice to endure. The torment began with Jackson "Jax" Sterling, an 18-year-old senior whose family name was etched into the very foundations of Crestwood. Jax, with his perfectly coiffed blonde hair, designer clothes, and an air of entitled disdain, ruled the school like a feudal lord. His two primary enforcers were Silas "the Brute" Vance, a hulking football player with a vacant stare and a penchant for intimidation, and Finn "the Serpent" Caldwell, a lean, sharp-eyed student known for his insidious whispers and cruel pranks. Together, they formed Crestwood's most feared triumvirate, and Caelan, the quiet new kid, had apparently been chosen as their new plaything. It started subtly, as these things always do. Caelan would find crude, demeaning caricatures drawn on his locker, his carefully organized notes scattered across the floor, or his lunch mysteriously disappearing. Anonymous messages, mocking his quiet demeanor and humble background, appeared on his desk. The harassment escalated when they began intercepting him between classes. "Well, well, if it isn't the Phantom of the Academy," Jax drawled one morning as Caelan hurried towards his history class. "In a rush, are we, Thorne? Got some important thoughts to think?" Caelan kept walking, but Silas stepped into his path, his massive form blocking the narrow corridor. "My friend asked you a question," Silas rumbled, arms crossed. "Just trying to get to class," Caelan replied softly, adjusting his backpack. "Oh, he speaks," Finn snickered, emerging from behind Silas. "I was starting to think he was a mute." "Perhaps he's too busy contemplating the meaning of lint," Jack suggested with mock concern, gesturing vaguely at Caelan's simple sweater. Caelan felt his jaw tighten, but he forced himself to remain calm. "Excuse me," he murmured, attempting to step around them. "Excuse me," Finn mimicked in a high-pitched voice. "Did you hear that? So polite. Perhaps we should teach him some manners." They let him pass that time, but Kalen knew it was only the beginning. The encounters grew more frequent, more aggressive. They'd accidentally trip him in the stairwells, sending his books clattering. They'd throw wadded-up paper at the back of his head during lunch. One particularly humiliating incident involved Finn accidentally spilling a full cup of coffee onto Kalen's only clean shirt during a study hall, leaving him sticky and stained for the rest of the day. Each time, Kalen gritted his teeth and walked away. Each time, he reminded himself of his father's words about choosing battles wisely. Each time, he went home and channeled his frustration into his hidden training space in the garage, unleashing combinations that would have incapacitated any of his tormentors in seconds. But at school, he remained the quiet, helpless target they expected him to be. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon in late October. Kalen had stayed after school to finish a complex art project he'd been working on in a secluded studio. The academy was mostly empty, save for a few lingering students. Kalen was making his way toward the side exit when he heard familiar voices echoing from a rarely used, narrow hallway near the old art wing. "Look what the cat dragged in, our resident shadow." Kalen's stomach clenched as he saw Jax, Silas, and Finn blocking his path. They were positioned strategically, Jax at the end of the hall, Silas and Finn flanking him. The hallway was isolated, and the thick stone walls would muffle any sounds. "Going somewhere, Thorn?" Jax asked, his voice echoing in the confined space. "Just heading home," Kalen replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Home to your humble abode?" Finn taunted. "Bet your dad's got some fascinating tech jargon waiting for you." "I don't want any trouble," Kalen said, which was the truth. Despite everything, he genuinely didn't want to hurt them. "Trouble," Silas grunted. "We're just having a friendly chat with our quiet friend here." "Some friend," Jax said, taking a step closer. "You know, Thorn, you've been rather rude. We try to engage and you just vanish, not very sociable." Kalen felt his muscles tense, his body instinctively preparing. He consciously relaxed, forcing his breathing to slow. "I apologize if I seemed rude. I was just focused on my work." "Work?" Finn repeated mockingly. "Always with the work. What are you, some kind of academic drone?" "Leave me alone," Kalen said, more forcefully this time. "Or what?" Jax challenged, moving even closer. "What are you going to do about it, little man?" That's when Finn made his move. While Kalen's attention was subtly drawn to Jax, Finn darted forward, his hand reaching for Kalen's pocket. "Let's see what kind of pocket money the drone carries," he sneered, but his hand didn't stop there. It slid down Kalen's leg, then deliberately squeezed his inner thigh, accompanied by a lewd, suggestive chuckle. "Oops," Finn said, his eyes glinting with malice. "Slipped." That's when something snapped inside Kalen. The weeks of humiliation, the constant violation of his space, the feeling of powerlessness, it all coalesced into a singular burning point. His father's voice, calm and resolute, echoed in his mind. "A shield, never a sword, unless the shield is all that remains." Time seemed to stretch as Kalen's training took over. Finn was still too close, his smirk fixed. Kalen's hand shot out, grabbing Finn's wrist with a grip of iron. In one fluid, almost imperceptible motion, he twisted Finn's arm, using the bully's own momentum to spin him around and slam him face first into the cold stone wall. Finn hit the wall with a sickening thud and crumpled to the ground, dazed and bleeding from his nose. Silas had barely registered what happened when Kalen spun to face him. The hulking football player's eyes widened in shock, but he was too slow. Kalen dropped low, sweeping Silas's legs out from under him. As Silas crashed to the floor, Kalen was already on him, pinning his arm behind his back with a swift, painful lock that made Silas gasp in agony. The entire sequence had taken less than 5 seconds, but Jax was already lunging. The bigger boy rushed at Kalen with a wild, desperate swing, but Kalen had been expecting it. He ducked under the clumsy punch and came up with a precise strike to Jax's solar plexus that made the bully double over, gasping for air. As Jax stumbled backward, Kalen followed up with a sharp, controlled elbow strike to the side of his jaw that sent him crashing into the wall. Jax slid down the wall and sat on the floor, his eyes unfocused, a trickle of blood running from the corner of his mouth. Kalen stood in the middle of the hallway, breathing heavily but controlled. His hair was disheveled, but he was unharmed. Around him, the 3 bullies who had terrorized him for weeks lay scattered like broken puppets. "Don't ever touch me again," Kalen said, his voice low and dangerous, a stark contrast to his usual whisper. "Don't speak to me. Don't look at me. Don't even think about me. This is your only warning." Finn was the first to stir, pushing himself up from the floor, blood streaming from his nose. "You're insane," he mumbled through swollen lips. "Absolutely insane." "No," Kalen replied, adjusting his backpack. "I'm trained. There's a difference." He gathered his scattered art supplies and headed for the exit, stepping over Silas, who was still groaning on the floor. Only when he was outside, breathing the cool autumn air, did Kalen allow himself to feel the full weight of what had just happened. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline surge and the profound release of weeks of pent-up frustration. What Kalen didn't know was that Lyra Beaumont, a junior known for her quiet artistic pursuits, had been coming down the hall to retrieve something from her locker when the confrontation began. She'd hidden in a recessed alcove and witnessed the entire brutal efficiency of the fight. By the next morning, the story had spread throughout Crestwood Academy like wildfire. Kalen arrived at school the next day to find a completely different atmosphere. Students were staring at him, but not with the mocking cruelty he'd grown accustomed to. Instead, he saw something he'd never experienced before: awe. Conversations stopped when he walked by, but it was different now. There was no malicious laughter, no cruel whispers. Instead, he heard fragments of amazed conversation. "Did you hear what happened to Jax and his crew? Kalen Thorne? The quiet kid? No way." Lyra Beaumont saw the whole thing. She said he took down all 3 of them in like 10 seconds. "I heard he's some kind of ninja." The rumors grew more elaborate with each telling. By lunchtime, some students were claiming he was a former child prodigy in a secret martial arts monastery, others that he was a government operative. One particularly imaginative sophomore was telling anyone who would listen that Kalen was actually a highly trained bodyguard in disguise. But the most significant change was the absence of Jax, Silas, and Finn. They weren't in the dining hall at their usual table, weren't patrolling the courtyards between classes. It was as if they had vanished entirely. Kalen was sitting alone at lunch, trying to ignore the stares and whispers, when someone slid into the seat across from him. He looked up to find Lyra Beaumont, the girl who had witnessed the fight. "Hi," she said simply. "I'm Lyra." "I know who you are," Kalen replied cautiously. "I saw what happened yesterday," she continued, "in the art wing hallway." Kalen felt his stomach drop. "Are you going to report it?" Lyra looked at him with surprise. "Report it? Kalen, you were defending yourself. That Finn kid he was touching you inappropriately. What you did was completely justified." "The Academy might not see it that way." "The Academy might not," Lyra agreed, "but I do. And so does everyone else who's heard about it. Do you know how many kids Jax and his friends have tormented over the years? How many students have been afraid to come to school because of them?" Kalen shook his head. "Dozens," Lyra said. "Maybe hundreds. And yesterday, you did what none of us had the courage to do. You stood up to them." "I didn't want to fight them," Kalen said quietly. "I tried to avoid it." "I know. I saw. You gave them every chance to leave you alone." Lyra leaned forward. Can I ask you something? Where did you learn to fight like that? Kaylin hesitated, then decided there was no point in hiding it anymore. I've been training in combat disciplines since I was a child. My father insisted on it after some incidents at my previous school. And you never used it before, even when they were harassing you? My father taught me that fighting should always be the last resort, that it's only for protecting yourself or others, never for showing off or proving a point. Lyra nodded slowly. That's exactly what you did yesterday. You protected yourself. The conversation was interrupted by an announcement over the PA system. Kaylin Thorne, please report to Headmistress Albright's office. Kaylin Thorne to the headmistress's office. Kaylin sighed. He'd been expecting this. Good luck, Lyra said softly. For what it's worth, I think you're a hero. Headmistress Evelyn Albright was a formidable woman in her 50s with impeccably styled silver hair and piercing blue eyes. She gestured for Kaylin to take a seat across from her antique mahogany desk. Mr. Thorne, she began, her voice crisp, I've received some very concerning reports about an incident yesterday afternoon. Kaylin took a deep breath. Yes, Headmistress. Would you care to explain what happened? Kaylin told her the truth, just as he'd told Lyra. He explained the weeks of harassment, the escalating bullying, and finally, the incident in the art wing hallway. He described how Finn had touched him inappropriately and how he'd finally been forced to defend himself. I know physical altercations are strictly forbidden on academy grounds, he concluded, and I'm prepared to accept whatever punishment you deem appropriate. But I want you to know that I didn't initiate this confrontation, and I only did what I felt was necessary to protect myself. Headmistress Albright had listened without interruption, her expression revealing nothing. Now she leaned back in her chair and studied him for a long moment. Mr. Thorne, are you aware that we have discreet security cameras installed in all of our less trafficked corridors, particularly after recent incidents of vandalism? Kaylin's heart sank. No, Headmistress. Well, we do, and I've reviewed the footage from yesterday afternoon very carefully. She turned to a computer screen on her desk and clicked a few keys. Would you like to see it? The grainy security footage clearly showed everything Kaylin had described. Jax, Silas, and Finn cornering him. Finn's deliberate, invasive touch. Kaylin's swift, almost surgical response that put all three bullies on the ground. Headmistress Albright paused the video. Sexual harassment is a grave offense at this academy, Mr. Thorne. So is physical intimidation and persistent harassment. All three of these young men have been suspended pending a full investigation, and Mr. Caldwell is facing additional charges for his inappropriate conduct. Kaylin blinked in surprise. I'm not in trouble. For defending yourself against sexual assault? Certainly not. Headmistress Albright's expression softened slightly. Though I would appreciate it if you would consider reporting harassment to academy officials before it escalates to this point in the future. Yes, Headmistress. That said, the Headmistress continued, your self-defense skills are quite remarkable. Our academy's Resilience and Self-Mastery Club, which has unfortunately been dormant for some time, could greatly benefit from someone with your expertise. Perhaps you'd consider volunteering as a peer instructor. Kaylin felt a genuine smile spread across his face for the first time in weeks. I'd like that very much. When Kaylin returned to class, word of the suspended bullies had already spread throughout the academy. The atmosphere was electric, with a mixture of satisfaction and disbelief. Students who had been terrorized by Jax's crew for years were openly celebrating their downfall. But the real change came over the following weeks. Kaylin found himself approached by students he'd never spoken to before. Some wanted to thank him for standing up to the bullies. Others asked about his combat training. A few even asked if he could teach them some basic self-defense moves. The Resilience and Self-Mastery Club, which had been struggling with only a handful of members, suddenly saw its enrollment explode. Kalen found himself leading workshops twice a week, teaching not just physical techniques, but also conflict resolution and mental fortitude to students who had never felt truly safe at school before. The club became a sanctuary where victims of bullying could learn to protect themselves and build confidence. But perhaps the most surprising development came 3 weeks after the incident. Kalen was walking to his car after a club workshop when he heard someone call his name. He turned to see Jack Sterling approaching hesitantly. Kalen immediately tensed, his body preparing for another confrontation. But Jack stopped several feet away and held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to fight," Jack said quickly, his usual arrogance replaced by a visible unease. "I just wanted to talk." "What do you want?" Kalen asked, his voice carefully neutral. Jax looked around nervously, then met Kalen's eyes. "I wanted to apologize for everything. What we did to you was wrong, and I'm sorry." It wasn't the most eloquent apology, but the genuine shame in Jax's voice suggested it was sincere. "Okay," Kalen said simply. "That's it? Just okay? What do you want me to say that I forgive you? I don't know if I do yet." Jax nodded slowly. "That's fair. I've been thinking a lot during my suspension about why I do the things I do, and I'm not proud of it." "You shouldn't be." "I know." Jax paused, then continued. "My father, he always said you had to be tough, had to establish dominance, or people would walk all over you. I guess I just believed him." Kalen studied Jax's face, seeing a flicker of vulnerability there that he'd never noticed before. "You don't have to be like them. You can choose to be better." "I don't know how." Kalen considered him for a moment. "You could start by helping instead of hurting. The Resilience and Self-Mastery Club could use volunteers for demonstrations. It might help you understand how it feels to be on the receiving end of intimidation." Jax's eyebrows shot up. "You want me to help? After everything?" "It's not about you," Kalen clarified. "It's about helping other students learn to protect themselves. And maybe it'll help you become the person you want to be, instead of the person you think you have to be." A slow, hesitant smile spread across Jax's face. "You're giving me a chance to make things right. I'm giving you a chance to try." The next few months brought changes to Crestwood Academy that surprised everyone. The Resilience and Self-Mastery Club became one of the most popular extracurricular activities, with Kalen leading workshops that taught not just physical techniques, but also conflict resolution and mental resilience. Jax, true to his word, became a regular volunteer, allowing himself to be thrown and pinned in demonstrations that helped other students overcome their fears. Silas, after his suspension, seemed to have lost his taste for bullying. He focused on football and actually showed improvement both in the sport and in his grades. Finn, perhaps shaken by the criminal charges he'd faced, transferred to another academy entirely. But the most significant change was in Kalen himself. For the first time in his life, he walked through school without trying to be invisible. He still preferred quiet corners and books to boisterous parties, but he no longer hunched his shoulders or avoided eye contact. He stood tall, spoke clearly, and let his strength show in ways that went beyond physical demonstrations. He made friends, real friends who knew about his background and respected him for it. He joined the debate team, where his calm demeanor and sharp mind made him a formidable opponent. He even started spending more time with Lyra Beaumont, who had become his biggest supporter and confidant. On the last day of school before winter break, Kalen found a small package in his locker. Inside was a simple, elegant keychain with a tiny, stylized shield emblem and a note that read, "To the guy who taught us all to stand up for ourselves. Thanks for showing us what real strength looks like. J.S. and the rest of the club." Kalen smiled as he attached the keychain to his backpack. He'd come to Crestwood Academy expecting to hide, to survive, to get through his senior year without making waves. Instead, he'd found his voice, his confidence, and his place in the world. As he walked towards the parking lot to meet his friends, Kalen reflected on everything that had changed since that day in the art wing. The bullies had chosen the wrong kid to target, yes, but maybe, in a strange way, they'd chosen exactly the right one, the one who could show them and everyone else what true strength looked like. Not the power to hurt others, but the courage to protect yourself and stand up for what's right. The ghost of Crestwood Academy was gone, replaced by a young man who understood that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is refuse to be a victim. And that lesson, Kalen knew, would serve him well for the rest of his life.